So we have this sort of conception that how the world works is you put in a certain amount of effort and you get a certain amount back. This is like well built into almost all mechanisms. This is how we sort of teach things in in school that there's a simple correlation between things, right? So what's called a simple linear correlation. The more you do something of X, the more Y that you actually get, some sort of output from that, right? So you put in effort, you get some benefit from that. Maybe you make more money, maybe your company does well, and there's this very simple correlation between those two. If you do one thing, the other one automatically sort of rises. But the field of sort of organizational science, the field that I'm in, is essentially deconstructing this. And it's been doing that for years now. And essentially, this simple correlation of how things actually work out doesn't actually work in the real world. In fact, what ends up happening often, unless it's under very specific scenarios, what ends up happening is that maybe it is you put some effort in and nothing happens. And you put some more effort in and absolutely nothing happens. And then you put even more effort in and nothing happens. And then 5 years down the road, you get some sort of output from that particular thing. Or sometimes this is what happens. So you put some effort in and a little wee bit happens, but it's really nothing. You put some more effort in and a little wee bit happens, but nothing really, nothing, right? Like you wouldn't discount or you would discount it. And then eventually you do this enough times, you put that little wee bit, and then all of a sudden you get this, what is called like a tipping point or sort of a exponential function that all of a sudden a tremendous amount happens where it's just this large windfall um, that you would never expect happen. Now, these dynamics, they seem like, well, that seems really weird, right? For this kind of stuff to happen, but it's actually the norm. This is what really happens. There's all sorts of different reasons for this, but generally, this is the norm that things are not as clear as you think it is. Now, in the long run, if you're to grab enough samples of something, you get millions and millions and millions of observations of something across millions of people, you might get a nice little correlation that happens, right? Where the more effort you put in, the more that you actually get from that. But real life does not work like that. Real life is about actually having these moments where absolutely nothing happens, or a whole bunch of stuff happens, or there's a whole bunch of things that are happening all at once, and you can't really understand what is actually happening, where something is interacting with something else. And this is the norm. In fact, how we study science, I believe, in my own view, or how we do things in science, is actually often patently wrong because we like to isolate a single effect. And then that story we tell is that sort of single effect that happens, but that's not real life. Real life is real messy, and there's not a lot of clear stuff that happens that we can uniformly say, hey, if you do this. Now, there's one thing that I do know that does work out, and I would say it works out in most people's life, but it's hard to sort of see and do. And that is that simple repetition um, actually does turn into something. But the relationship in terms of when that happens, how that happens, what's that look like, it is not clear cut, right? And I see this all the time. So I swim, and my kids swim as well, and you see this sort of relationship where most people quit because they don't see really any sort of progress. It seems it's really slow and painful. But then all of a sudden you get these like moments where something crazy happens and you make a significant amount of progress and then nothing happens. And sometimes you actually regress and it's actually worse than what you were before. But that is the norm. That is what we should expect. That's what we should teach, where we kind of have this sort of bumpy thing that happens. So here's the thing, what can you actually do with this sort of result that things are just messy, right? Um, even you might look at child development or human development. You might look at how companies actually perform. You might look at all sorts of different stuff, right? Like across the board, things are messy. You might look at how trees grow. It might be a little bit more straightforward with trees growing, but we also know that there are days or years where there's droughts, there's years where there's forest fires, there's all sorts of different things, right? And what can we take away from this, right? We necessarily can't say, hey, um, just give up, right? Like I think that's the response that a lot of people have. And then on the other side, it's like, hey, just repeatedly do something until something actually happens, which I'm more in favor of if you're really dedicated towards it. Now, how do you actually get there? Well, it requires a lot of gumption and sort of a lot of things that go on. But, what does this all mean if you sort of add this up? It's the general thing that I want to point out is to not get tied up in the actual outcomes. And this is kind of a tricky thing to sort of learn. This is where you have to actually just like doing the thing that is going to get you to where you're going to go, right? And this is completely different than what everybody else teaches, right? This is really strange. In fact, it's really strange in terms of even the stuff that I would teach in strategy. We focus on sort of performance, but the performance isn't the thing that actually gets you there. The thing that gets you there is actually getting up and doing that thing repeatedly and showing up or just enjoying it, right? How you get good at something is actually enjoying it. How you get good at macrame, for example, is not because you're sort of doing things with performance in mind. You're doing it because you actually enjoy to do it. And as soon as that enjoyment disappears and it's drudgery and it feels awful, you quit. And then you're going to sort of select on those that are doing it because they are actually enjoying it. So I think the long story short here is don't expect any results from anything. I think that is a complete misnomer in terms of how we think about things. We should be expecting joy from actually doing something, right? Whatever that particular thing is, you should get a nice feeling, a sort of warm glow from that thing rather than the actual performance, the sort of success indicator that everybody looks for. All right, take care and have a wonderful day.